Thank you very much. And this is a work that I have done together with Linda Wänström, who is not here because she has had an accident, not that serious, but so she couldn't be here, unfortunately. So I will, because of the time, I will run a bit fast. According to a social ecological framework, bullying can be considered as established, sustained, and changed over time as a result of reciprocal associations between individual and contextual factors. And it's really hard to argue against that. Nevertheless, this study cannot be a study of everything, so we have to make some choices and to focus on particular factors. And in school, the classroom microsystem is the most proximal contextual influence. And when we talk about the classroom microsystem or the classroom level, we are referring to the school class, the formal group of students as a unit. And in this study, there are kids from the 4th and 5th and 6th grades. So in the Swedish school systems, they are very much in the very same classroom for most of the lessons, a kind of home classroom. So therefore, I sometimes say classroom, sometimes I would say the school class. So, what kind of variables have we put into this study? The first one is altruistic motivation. And altruistic motivation can be defined as a motivational state with the ultimate goal of increasing another person's welfare. So this is something that indicate an altruistic self-concept or altruistic self-scheme, even though it is also dependent on the situation. And what we are interested in this study is altruistic motivation in defending a victim of bullying. I think this is about kids who really think it's important to help people who are mistreated by others, to fight violence, injustice, and oppression, and think that I'm a person who cares about others. So that is the construct that we have put in as one of the individual variables. And when we look at previous research, we can see that altruism in terms of altruistic self-esteem, self-concept, or motivation is associated with greater prosocial behavior as well as defender behavior in bullying and defender behavior in homophobic harassment situations. And yeah, it pretty much makes sense that kids who are considering themselves to be altruistic, who score high in altruistic motivation, are probably more involved in prosocial behavior. What is of interest for our study is the next pattern from the literature, that altruism is associated with less aggression among adults. Based on that, it is plausible to assume that altruistic motivation might be a protective factor for bullying. That kids who score high in altruistic motivation to defend victims might also be less involved in bullying behavior. The other individual variable that we have put into the analysis is the tendency of blaming the victim. According to Lerner's just world hypothesis, people tend to assume that victims have earned their suffering by their actions or characteristics. Blaming the victim is a way of maintaining a belief of having an agency, of avoiding bad things by doing good things. Nevertheless, the tendency of blaming the victim and the degree of believing in a just world vary across individuals. According to Werner's attributional theory, blaming the victim functions as a self-serving attribution that allows perpetrators and bystanders to distance themselves from the victims and their suffering. Furthermore, within Bandura's social cognitive theory of moral disengagement, blaming the victim is considered to be a mechanism that allows the perpetrators to self-exonerate their inhumane behavior, preventing them from feeling guilt. And if we go into the research, we can see this pattern from previous studies, that bullying behavior has been associated with blaming the victim. So kids who are more inclined to blame the victim seem to be more inclined to be engaged in bullying behavior. And we can also see in the literature in moral disengagement, in which blaming the victim is a part of the global construct of moral disengagement, that moral disengagement has also been shown in studies to be associated with aggression and bullying. We have also in the analysis, we have put in as control variables, gender and age at the individual level. So, as we know from many studies from the past, that boys seems to be more prone to bully than girls. When it comes to age, in a Swedish context, bullying is more common among 4th to 6th graders as compared to older students, because these are 4th to 6th graders are the range of the students in this study. We don't have any particular hypothesis about age, but we still put that in as a control variable. Let's move on then to the classroom level. And what we were interested in was the bystander pattern in the school classes or in the classroom level. And according to the participant role approach developed by Salmivali and colleagues in Finland, we have 4 bystander roles that can emerge in bullying situations. We have the assistant role, which is about assisting or joining the bully. We have the reinforcer, which is about supporting the bully by cheering and laughing. We have the outsider, which is about remaining passive or neutral. And we have the defender, which is about helping or supporting the victim. And because the assistants and reinforcers encourage bullying by siding with the bully, they could be labeled as pro-bullying bystanders. And this idea of letting assistants and reinforcers be merged into one factor has also been confirmed in the previous factor analysis that we have conducted in our self-report bystander scale. So research has revealed that between classroom variability in bullying can be explained in part by the bystander prevalence. So to be more specific, the more classmates assist and reinforce bullying, provide less support and fail to defend the victims, the more often bullying is likely to occur. So it is therefore reasonable to hypothesize that bullying should be more prevalent in classrooms that are high in pro-bullying and low in defending. So the aim of the current study was to examine whether gender, age, altruistic motivation to defend victims, and the tendency to blame the victim at the individual level, and the prevalence of 2 main bystander responses, pro-bullying and defending at the classroom level, were associated with bullying. In order to do that, a total of 901 Swedish students from 43 classrooms ranging in age from 9 to 13 years old filled out a self-report questionnaire. And here you have a list of the scales or sub-scales that we used in this particular study, even though we have also other scales and sub-scales, but for this analysis we have used these one. So from our defender motivation scale based on self-determination theory, we used a couple of items that we saw represented altruistic motivation to defend victims. Just to give you a glimpse from that scale, the question was, what would make you want to help a student who is bullied? And there was a lot of different items for different kinds of motivations, including also items that represent a motivation, that I would not do it for any reason, and so on. But here are examples of items that we use to tap altruistic motivation. Because I think it's important to help people who are mistreated by others, because I'm a person who cares about others, because I think it's important to fight violence, oppression, and injustice. So, now we can say something about the findings. Sorry, I will just comment the others. I'm too fast now. Sorry for that. Blaming the victim in bullying was from our short version of the moral disengagement scale. And bystander behavior in bullying is our self-report bystander scale. And then we also had a scale about bullying perpetration. So, here are the correlations for individual level variables. And as you can see in this correlation matrix, is that whereas girls scored higher on altruistic motivation, boys scored higher on the tendency of blaming the victim and bullying perpetration. You can also see in the matrix that altruistic motivation was negatively associated or correlated with blaming the victim and bullying. And finally, blaming the victim was positively correlated with bullying. If we move up to the classroom level, here we have the two main classroom level variables, and we also constructed for this correlation matrix the classroom mean of bullying. And as you can see, among the classroom variables, we found that greater pro-bullying and less defending were associated with greater bullying. So the results suggest that bullying is less likely to occur in peer classroom microsystems characterized with less pro-bullying and greater defending. So let's go to the multi-level analysis of the data. So here is the first model, and this is the individual variables. And as you can see here is that altruistic motivation was associated with less pro-bullying, whereas blaming the victim was associated with more bullying. When we add the classroom level variables, we can see in the model 2 in the table that the previous associations are still there. But in addition, we can also see that pro-bullying prevalence was positively associated with bullying. In other words, students were more likely to bully when they belonged to a school class in which pro-bullying was a more common bystander reaction. Then we also added cross-level interactions. And if we look at this model number 3, we can see that still the previous associations are there. But in addition to that, we can also see, sorry, I was too fast. We can see that the relationship between altruistic motivation and bullying was affected by classroom prevalence of pro-bullying. So what does that mean? To help us out, we have constructed a graph. So here we have the cross-level interaction effect between altruistic motivation to defend and the class level pro-bullying. So if you look at this graph, you can see bullying over here, the level of bullying, and here you can see low altruistic motivation to defend, and here we have high altruistic motivation to defend. And the lines represent different levels of the classroom variable of pro-bullying, the pro-bullying prevalence. So the red line stands for high level of pro-bullying, and the green level stands for a medium level of pro-bullying, and the blue line stands for low level of pro-bullying in the class. So as can be seen here, the negative association between altruistic motivation and bullying was stronger for school classes with high pro-bullying mean scores, whereas it was close to flat for school classes with low pro-bullying means. In other words, in school classes in which pro-bullying was an unusual bystander reaction, students were less inclined to bully, independently of their own degree of altruistic motivation, whereas in school classes in which pro-bullying was a more common bystander reaction, students were less inclined to bully if they had a high level of altruistic motivation, and more inclined to bully if they had a low level of altruistic motivation. Thus, high altruistic motivation seems to function as a protective factor that makes students more resistant toward the peer pressure of pro-bullying, which is also in line with the social determination theory, in which this is a kind of identified motivation. So, some conclusions based on this data. The multi-level regression analysis revealed that bullying was positively associated with the prevalence of pro-bullying at classroom level and blaming the victim at the individual level, whereas it was negatively associated with altruistic motivation to defend victims in bullying at individual level and high altruistic motivation to defend victims in bullying made students less inclined to bully independently of the classroom level of pro-bullying. As in all kinds of studies, there are always limitations. So just let me point to some of the limitations in our study. First of all, because we have adapted a cross-sectional design, we are unable to point the direction of effects. The N, the sample size at the classroom level, is only 43. The study was based on self-reported data, which might have introduced careless marking, social desirability, and intentionally exaggerated reporting, such as over-reporting defender behavior and under-reporting pro-bullying and bullying and so on. And the bullying variable has been treated as a continuous variable, which could be criticized for measuring aggression or peer victimization and perpetration rather than bullying. Anyway, these limitations aside, our findings have clear implications for teachers and policymakers and so on. The findings suggest that vital components in bullying prevention programs should be to address bystander patterns among students in order to reduce pro-bullying, as in the Kiva program, for instance. Strengthen altruistic self-concept and motivation to defend victims, fostering compassion for others' welfare, rights, equality, and social justice. And challenge and counteract tendencies of blaming the victim. And the time is running fast, like a bird flying away, as this presentation will do now. Thank you for your attention.